All right, so finally, we have now come to the part wherein we're going to talk about how to write a report for t-test. Specifically, our example is a product of independent samples t-test. But please take note that the manner by which we write the report for paired samples t-test is practically identical to the way we write a report for paired samples t-test. So this is the table that we have prepared based on the results that we have run in JASP. And I have prepared here a write-up which we can analyze. Now let's analyze it in terms of format, in terms of content, and in terms of some suggestions on how to be able to communicate to your reader the results of your findings. First of all, let's talk about format. So the result is in a paragraph format. So please remember, because this is a paragraph, to indent the first sentence of your paragraph. Countless times I receive reports from students wherein their paragraphs are not indented, and it's kind of annoying. So please indent your paragraph. Next, you will notice that it's double spaced. The APA suggests double spaced or 1.5 spaces, but I prefer double spaced so that it's for readability, for better readability. Another thing that you will notice is that it's only aligned on the left side and the right side is not aligned. So leave it as it is. No, don't align it. So flush left only. So left aligned only. Okay. Now, a typical report would vary, in terms of its content. In actual manuscripts, sometimes you need to economize the words that you use because some publications have limits in terms of how many words your manuscript should be. And so sometimes the manner by which the results are communicated are very parsimonious, simple, short. But what I have here is relatively more comprehensive. And I suppose this type of writing is something that you can use in a manuscript. Although don't be surprised that when you check other manuscripts, it's not exactly, or the content is not exactly the same. Well, one of the dangers of showing you a write-up or a sample write-up is that students tend to feel that this is sort of a template, wherein they'll just sort of copy and paste this, replace the variables, replace the values, replace some of the parts, some of the words that were used, and submit it as a requirement. The objective for this afternoon is to talk about what should you put in and the style of writing. But please do not make use of this as a template for your submissions. There is there should be a balance between one following conventions of academic writing, because there are conventions, and at the same time your sort of parang personal style in writing. It's not a 50-50 balance. So I think the conventions you should be more conscious of the conventions, rather than having your writing be dominated by a personal style. So there is some elbow room, to make your report parang genuinely your own, but at the same time subscribing to some standards or some expectations, let's say for example from reviewers. So this is my suggestion for the write-up, and if you're my student, then these are the things that I would look for when you submit. Typically, I would begin by reminding the reader what the goal of my study is. So in some publications they go straight to this part now wherein they talk about the results. But if you have if you're not really, I mean, if you have a lot of room for, you know, explanation, it would be best to remind the readers again what the objective is, and even the hypothesis, because of course the results are anchored on the hypothesis. You wouldn't be discussing a result that was not part of the objective of your study, that you did not hypothesize about. No, so it's always good to remind your reader those two. So it says here, the goal of the study is to determine if there is a sex difference in venting, and that's what this result is for. No, the result is about examining sex differences in venting. And if you remember, we hypothesized that females will score higher in venting compared to males. And that's exactly what I said here. No? It was hypothesized. So I'm using past tense because we've hypothesized this earlier. It was hypothesized that females will score higher in venting compared to males. All right, so the first sentence, the objective. The second sentence, what was your hypothesis? I'm not sure if there's another way of saying this other than it was hypothesized. I really don't like starting the sentence with the hypothesis is, or you know, things like that. Also, some students still refer to the null hypothesis. We know that we're testing the null, but of course we should mention our alternative hypothesis. And then after that, I want to remind the reader what we did to test the hypothesis. So I said, to test this hypothesis, independent samples t-test was conducted. So it's also good to remind the reader what analysis or what statistical analysis you used. And so after the first three sentences, then I will talk about the results. The results is just one sentence, and in here I have incorporated the descriptives because that is important for us to know which between males and females actually on average scored higher in venting. Plus I also placed in here some information or some statistic in reference to the t-test that we have conducted. And actually, if you remove these, the sentence would still or should still make sense, right? So I'm gonna read this. Table 1, of course, referring to this table, reveals that the average venting among females there is significantly higher than males there. And why did I say significantly higher? Because our result is significant with a p-value of 0.007. So that in itself describes the result. No, but for more information for your reader, well, in fact, this is perfectly okay, because actually the suggestion is that if it's already in on the table, there's no need to mention it in the text. No, but to highlight that this is the result, I have included the appropriate statistics. So when I say the average venting among males, immediately after the mention of the group, I placed the statistics, particularly the mean. And of course, every time that you report the mean, always report the standard deviation. They are paired, and then is significantly higher than that of males. So I mentioned the other group, and so I injected the other statistics. So this is the mean and standard deviation for the males, and then separated by a comma, I indicated the result of the t statistics. So the format is t, and then what you find inside the parenthesis right beside the t is the degrees of freedom. So the degrees of freedom is 198. So you put that in parenthesis right after t, is equal to 2.715, which is the value of the t, comma, p value is equal to 0.007. Now, to make this look nicer, first of all, I have to italicize all non-Greek statistical notations. So even here, the mention of t in t-test, that should be italicized. And so we also have to italicize, m for mean, st for standard deviation. But there's a quick way to do that. If you highlight this, let's highlight them one by one. And you go to click on insert in your tabs, and you click on equations. It's automatically formatted into what I was saying a while ago, wherein the non-Greek statistical notations have to be in italics. And we can do that for the rest. So go to insert, click on the equation tab for this as well. Okay. Here as well. And then also for the t statistic. And finally for the p-value. Okay. So this is your main result. And then after which I'm going to discuss, or I'm going to mention the effect size, because that's important. So I simply say the effect size is medium because it's 0.384. Okay. So we also format that as an equation. Take note, I still have no lead zero for the t-value because this value cannot exceed 1, and I have a lead zero for Cohen's t because this value can exceed 1. Take note of the choice of words. We only say small, medium, large. We do not say low, average, high. When describing the effect size is only small, medium, large. And then my last sentence is sort of an interpretation of what the result is. The goal is to somehow interpret the result in a manner that can be understood by somebody who doesn't really know much statistic. So I said, but it's not echoing what you've already said, no. Normally, if you notice, I don't use the word venting here, but instead I take note of how venting is defined in my study, and I use that definition when explaining the result. So I said these findings these findings suggest that women are more likely than men to express their emotion as a coping strategy when stressed or frustrated. You'll notice that I didn't say these findings suggest that women are more likely than men to vent, because that's basically just repeating what I said here. So instead of saying venting or vent, I describe or define what venting is, or what vent means, which is this one: to express their emotion as a coping strategy when stressed or frustrated. And that's it. That is how you prepare a write-up for t-test. Again, this should not be taken as a template. This is an example, and I hope that you be guided in terms of the content, in terms of the sequence of information, in terms of how you format the statistical values, and just work with that sort of rather narrow elbow room, wherein you can sort of personalize your report without deviating from scholarly standards. So that's it. I hope that you learned, and I will see you in the next.